Rural America is enduring challenges in many states, regardless of the state, really. How do you keep the residents you have, much less find a way to grow, even if it's just a little? Jacob Wasserburger has an idea. You could buy some land from the state for $1 an acre. Hi, I'm Dave Price. Jacob Wasserburger is State Representative Jacob Wasserburger, a self-described America First legislator in Wyoming. He's in his first term. This week, he shares with us what he hopes will help convince people to build a home with the state's help in an affordable way. Well, Mr. State Representative, thank you. Appreciate the time. I know you're getting ready to start a new legislative session, so we appreciate the chance to catch up with you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for your time today, Dave, and your interest. And how are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. All right, let's do politics first so we can kind of wind people up on how you got into this gig. You're still a rookie, right? Still a freshman.
Yeah, this is this is my first term as a legislator. I'm going into the second year, which would be our budget year at the Wyoming Capitol. So second year, but first term still.
And why'd you want to get into this?
You know, Dave, one of the things that I saw that I was really concerned about in politics was just the type of people that were running for office. I kept seeing them saying they were going to vote, a particular way. But yet here in the state, I kept seeing our wind turbines growing, our solar farms growing. I kept seeing, new taxes being implemented. I had to, there was one time that one of the legislators had to do a roll call vote. That way, so the vote was recorded because they were getting ready to add an amendment that would have restricted some people's gun rights. And so I just became really concerned about the integrity of the people that were running this state. And in Wyoming, we'd like to think that all of our neighbors are really friendly and good people. But at the same time, in a state like this where we can get complacent and we want to be left alone, that's the best time for somebody to get involved when people aren't typically paying attention. So I ended up running because I was really concerned with the cost of living, property taxes. I told my constituents I wanted to stop BlackRock and Vanguard and other private equity from buying up single family homes. And I also wanted to have it to where we had a law where not just where the votes are recorded on third reading, or if there's or if somebody demands a roll call vote, but that we have first and second reading recorded as well, just like we record our third reading. I wanted to have a little bit more transparency and accountability in our legislature.
All right, so you decided, and before we started recording today and started doing the podcast, doing the show, you even mentioned that you pitched a couple ideas and found yourself getting in the national headlines. So let's talk about this one that you're working on right now. So this idea about selling some state land for people to build a home. Explain where this idea came from. How'd you come up with this?
Yeah, thank you for your interest, Dave. So like I said before, I campaigned on stopping private equity and hedge funds from buying up single family homes. I originally went to the Legislative Service Office, which is our staff that helps with writing bills and for anybody that doesn't know that, they're the staff for the legislature. Some, whether it's writing bills, some, whether it's secretary needs or IT. So I went to our staff that works on writing our bills and told them that I wanted to do a bill that would put a limit and restrict, selling our single family homes to private equity firms. Well, one of the issues with that I ran into, Dave, was if I own a house and I want to sell it to, let's say, BlackRock or Vanguard or any of these other private equities, who's got the right to tell me that I can't do that? So that's the constitutional issue that you run into, where that can be kind of a liability issue, so to say. So the idea of the Homestead Act was something that I thought of over a year for about a year now. I've been trying to sit here and think like, how do we address this issue? Because this is an issue. Young families and and people on Social Security or and just any generation for that matter, they just can't compete with the rising costs of living. So I came up with it. I looked into other ways to find our state lands and to see, it came to my thought that, we had a lot of land here in Wyoming that's open. And I thought that that'd be a great possibility to use that availability. And I also worked with a couple other friends to kind of form the think tank on this. So, but that's kind of how this all originated was when I first tried to figure out how do we stop BlackRock and Vanguard from buying these homes or private equity. The Homestead Act would be intentionally for Wyoming residents to be able to buy 10 acres of land for $1 an acre with the intention of them building a residential property on it. The parcels would only be exclusive to Wyoming residents. So you would have had to have lived in the state for at least a year or longer to be able to qualify in the drawing. The State Lands Investment Board would be doing the drawing on who qualifies, who's going to get the winning drawing to to acquire these parcels to build a residential property on them.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate to you. What happens to the folks who are listening to this interview and they're like, "Dang, sounds like a pretty good deal. Wyoming's beautiful. I'd love to get a house there, but I live in Indiana, Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, whatever." They wouldn't be eligible, right? Wouldn't this be good as a way to bring in some new residents?
It would be a great way to bring in new residents. One of the concerns a lot of people have, though, is the people that have lived here first. What do we do for the folks that have devoted their entire lives to the state of Wyoming? So I mean, we do have a significant issue with growth here in the state of Wyoming, but at the same time, a lot of people just really aren't on board with significant growth. So having it to where it could be homestead exclusive to just Wyoming residents, I believe would be able to develop that great economic opportunity for the state of Wyoming and promoting some growth, but without it being that a boom, so to say, like what you saw maybe in Colorado after the marijuana legalization, or the boom you saw in North Dakota when oil was really taken
Mm-hmm.
off there.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I saw with that, Dave, in both of those incidences was the mass migration. I also, from what I witnessed, there was a lot of crime that happened during those times when the mass migration first happened. So while having some economic growth here in the state of Wyoming is very important, it's also important that we can have it done in a measured faction, and so we can keep Wyoming, and not see it turn into a bigger type of boom from what you saw in some of these other locations.
So how much land do you think could be available for this?
Originally starting, uh, I thought that there could potentially be up to 100,000 acres. State Lands Investment Board, speaking with them, they said that from what they can see right now, without doing any surveys on the land yet, they said they could see that maybe there'd be about 16,000 acres. So in the bill, I don't know, Dave, if you're too familiar with the Homestead Act of 1862 that was implemented by Abraham Lincoln. But when Abraham Lincoln implemented that Homestead Act, they had they had an appropriation in the bill, or a fiscal note in there to be able to survey the land to where this would be possible. So I do have a little bit of history in this bill, with having an appropriation in there so we can have that opportunity to survey this land and see what areas would be a possibility for having a residential home.
And do you have any sense yet where the communities could be that would be eligible?
A lot of places that could potentially have that possibility are going to be places near like coal mines, possibly.
Okay.
Um, there's state land north of Niobrara County, well, north of the tiny town there, Manville, that has 640 acres. I think we would have an opportunity to survey that land out there and see if that would be a possibility to have maybe an opportunity for a homestead there, and various other places throughout the state where I think we have that opportunity to survey the land and see what's possible.
So is your sense that these would be in very small communities that would have this potential room for growth? Are they more moderate communities? Is it a mix, or do you know that yet?
That's still to be determined. It's going to
Okay.
just depend on where we have the accessibility to it. You know, I mean, if there's places in a place like Laramie County where there's, the most populated place in the state, if somebody was able to acquire a homestead that wanted to move out a little bit more outside of the city, I mean, I'd see that as being a potential opportunity. I know in places like Albany County, it's very, very landlocked by a lot of the ranchers that live there. So in Laramie and Albany County, where Laramie is, uh, the potential for growth there would be very, very difficult to do, I believe. Same with Teton County. Teton County, one of the things with that area is that's kind of where some of the wealthiest people in the world live. So I'm not sure if that would be an ideal place for a homestead, because these homesteads would be, the intention of them would be for those folks that are trying to get into housing and are just competing with the ever increasing cost of living. Whereas maybe in Teton County, if you're living there, that might not be as much of an issue. One of the other things that would factor into it being an issue over there in Teton County, I believe, Dave, is you have a lot of zoning regulations and other types of requirements that I think would make it really difficult to do homesteading out in that part of the state. But I mean, I think as far as what my vision would be, Dave, is to be able to, in our places where we have very minerally deficient counties where money isn't really as flourished,
Hmm.
it'd be an opportunity for a little bit of growth to go into those counties. You know, in Niobrara County, that county is so that's where I originally grew up, Dave. That's where my family's from. And every time I go out there, it always just seems like it shrinks more and more.
Mm.
They used to have two restaurants there that were consistently open. Well, now they're down to one. The other one, the Outpost Cafe, is shut down completely. Their gas station's still open, but not the restaurant. And the other restaurant that's in town is only open on the evenings. And, I
Mm.
mean, that's from when I'm there, it's kind of a hit or miss if it's open. And then you've
Sure.
got Faux Bears, which is a tiny little, breakfast burrito place. They're only open during the days. And then so your other options is the bars. So, I mean, if a family's going to go out to live in a place like my hometown, you're likely, I mean, it's going to be really hard to get a family convinced to move there if they
Sure.
are limited on what their options are. I mean, it doesn't need to necessarily turn into New York City, but I mean, a little bit of growth would be very beneficial for our parts of our state where we need to have that growth in order to keep the society going.
How big's your hometown?
When I graduated from there, it was about 1,200 people.
Okay.
I think it's still roughly about there, maybe a little less, but it's there's two stoplights in the town, and it seems like, without me knowing the exact numbers, Dave, it seems like it just keeps shrinking there all the time.
And that's tough. That's tough to see, right? We've got that going on in so many communities across the country where we've got to figure out how to keep these towns populated.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing about it is, I mean, it's really hard to get a manufacturer to move there if you have
Sure.
none of this. And I mean, and with a homestead, I mean, if there's 640 acres that could potentially be used for homesteading, I mean, that'd be 64 houses out there in that county. Now, while that's not a life changing amount of growth, I mean, for that county, it would be quite significant for that county specifically. Just it is the lowest populated county in the state. So it'd be it'd be a recognizable amount of growth for that county.
All right. So what's been the feedback? Let's start with your colleagues. What have some of the other legislators said to you about this idea?
I've had mostly I've had a lot of them say that they're not on board with it, that they think it's a little uncomfortable of an idea.
And is it because
I've
you're
had
talking about getting rid of the state land? Is that what bugs them or what?
Yeah, that's what bugs them. I mean, a lot of people have called it a land grab. The people that have opposed it, when I get emails opposing the bill, that's what it always says in the title is selling public lands. It doesn't talk about the homestead opportunity. People that support the bill, I mean, it pretty quickly because they say homestead in the title rather than selling public land. But the people that have the opposition pushback I've gotten the most, Dave, I think is from the folks that are hunters here in the state of Wyoming.
Hmm.
And so we've got great hunting here in the state. And I mean, and I personally am not against hunting. In fact, I told the Wildlife Federation that the next time they go hunting, I'd love to go with them. And they can teach me all the great places around Cheyenne where we can go hunt geese. And I would love that. So, I mean, I think that's where a lot of this pushback comes from is it's a brand new idea. Also, the other thing about it is we're hitting a really emotional point with this particular bill. I mean, cost of housing is an issue. People are feeling financial constraints. And then we're bringing a brand new, well, basically a brand new idea that hasn't really been thought of in the new modern age. So, I mean, you're going to have it's going to draw a lot of interest. You're going to have a lot of people that feel either a pain point or an excitement point of some type of emotion with this type of bill because we're talking about housing. Housing bills typically are going to be an emotional bill. And so, but that's kind of the main opposition I've seen so far from this, Dave, is just what the hunters have to say about it.
What about when you go back home?
When I go back home,
that's a community like you talked about could use some people, right? It could use some new families, new homeowners there. Like, do they get it? Do they see the potential of this, or are they thinking more like the hunters that they don't want this kind of encroaching on their space?
I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, Dave. At the same time, I've gotten some feedback that was not so positive.
Hmm.
I feel like some people that live out there just don't want any growth whatsoever. And that,
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they live out there is because it's a lower populated area.
Sure.
But the people that do live out there that don't want to see that place just completely disappear, because I mean, you can't just rely on ranching and agriculture to make that county exist. I mean, you do have to have a little bit of community development there in order for that county to survive. So it's been interesting. I've had two or three, I mean, that's a place where you don't hear as much, but I've had a few people say, yeah, they've actually texted me and said, hey, thank you for thinking of us out here where we're, not really growing. And then the pushback I've gotten is, as of right now, though, the pushback that I've gotten is just, I don't agree with it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I always ask them, well, what is your solution to solving the problem with housing when we're competing with these private equities that are buying up single family homes? As of right now, nobody's really given me a clear answer. I've gotten one clear answer, Dave, from somebody that told me to talk to one of my colleagues that works on this stuff. The issue I have with that, though, is I'm not gonna say any names, but the issue I have with the way that they're doing it is they've considered like low income housing where it's going to be apartment complexes
Hmm.
possibly some government appropriations. And it's very similar practice to what we've seen over in Los Angeles and parts of California, where homelessness became even worse after they had practiced these. And so that's the one, when I've asked people, that's the one answer I've gotten back so far is
Why
to
not do
consider
that?
that route,
Hmm.
which I think people would much rather be homeowners than just stick in apartments and studios the rest of their life.
So where does this go from here?
This bill,
Hmm.
I believe as of right now, where this goes is what we're doing, Dave, is we're moving the Overton window. It's a new idea. It's created a lot of buzz, as you're I'm sure aware, since you were able to discover me.
Yeah.
So I
I
mean,
was curious what the national attention, if while I appreciate you doing this conversation with us, I am curious if all the outside attention helps or hurts.
it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah,
I think in the short term, you might feel a little bit of pain. I mean, from the people that are in opposition are always going to be significantly louder than the people that support it.
for sure.
Over time, I mean, it's something that we've seen in history before. I mean, tariffs were not exactly popular when they first started out, and now they're popular. Uh, oh, Jay, who's the founder? I believe it was James Mattis. No, John Quincy Adams was one of the founding fathers that was trying to end slavery during the time that the Constitution was written. And during the 17 years that he tried doing that, it wasn't really successful. But over time, I mean, now we have seen that has been a successful and popular idea. So I see that being a similar scenario with this bill, Dave.
You just
I see
committed
it.
to 17 years, right?
What's that?
I said, did you just commit to 17 years that you're going to work at this?
Well, not so. I
Hopefully not,
mean,
right?
I'm giving an analogy. I mean,
Yeah.
tariffs only took a couple months, so maybe I'm only giving a couple months to this. But I mean, when you move the Overton window, Dave, it's always going to have an interesting level of controversy. But with time, I do think things will become more popular. You might see where instead of it being a statewide bill, you might see a county sit there and go, well, how do we address this issue? Like
Hmm.
maybe in our own county, we do consider taking some land and encouraging some homestead opportunities on this land.
I was going to ask
Um,
you about that. If you would consider if it'd kind of be less jarring for people if you almost did it like a pilot project of some sort where you just pick one area and try it out.
that has been a suggestion, is to do like just a small little
Hmm.
area and allow just a few people be able to um, participate in having a homestead and seeing what it does from there. And I'm open to that idea. I mean, that's kind of the thing with this bill, Dave, is we got to get the conversation started. The cost of housing is going to keep rising no matter what, whether we let this die or let it exist. I mean, this is going to be an issue that's ongoing. And as the cost of housing goes up, struggling to, as young families keep struggling to compete to be able to acquire home ownership, I mean, this is something that people might possibly draw back to, or they might draw back to other ideas. But I mean, we could either do something or we could do nothing.
You mentioned something a couple of minutes ago that I wanted to kind of circle back to because I feel like I've had this conversation with a bunch of people. An idea like yours really kind of maybe zeroes in on this that you have some people in smaller communities who want it to stay that way. And like while you talked about you go back home and it's kind of a bummer where you lose some choices, you don't have as many places for restaurants, all those kind of things, and it feels like it's smaller and smaller. And some people are probably fine with that, right? Like that's the tough conversation to have in some of these communities, right? Like some people believe in, especially as agriculture has shifted over the years and it doesn't take as many people as it once did, those jobs need to do something else, but you don't necessarily, you have some people who don't really want to see new industry or new potential, new occupations move in because they kind of like it the way it's been.
For those folks, Dave, I can understand where they're coming from. I mean, if you're living in a really condensed area, it does get to be crowded. And sure, yeah, having
Yeah.
a place where there's a lot of space, it's a lot more pleasant. Um, so, I mean, to kind of go with what you're saying there, that kind of leads me to circling back to what I was telling you about, like when you see the significant booms in North Dakota or Colorado, I mean, the reason why we have it exclusive to Wyoming residents is because, I'm representing Wyoming and I'm trying to bring an opportunity to Wyoming residents. So, I mean, that would be kind of this best spot that I could see this being a solution is, yeah, if you don't want growth, you don't want a boom in your county, but I mean, in order for it to survive, you got to have something.
Some kind of growth.
So, I mean, for the folks that don't want any growth, I mean, they can keep getting their wish granted. And I mean, what does that area do when everything's gone eventually? I mean, people just keep getting pushed out of those tiny areas and keep getting packed into bigger cities where housing is really hard to compete with.
That is the challenge of it. Hey, we really appreciate you walking us all through this. I know sometimes you probably had to think a little bit whether you really wanted to talk to somebody out of state, to put even more attention on this. But this is one of those ideas that gets people talking. So we appreciate you being willing to do it.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, Dave. It was a pleasure being on here. If you ever want another interview, feel free to shoot me an email.
We'll do that. Thank you much.
Yep. Thank you. You have a good one.
You too. He is State Representative Jacob Wasserburger. You can learn more about that other idea he had for a Bitcoin strategic reserve in Wyoming. That is included in our profile piece about him, and you can find that in the weekly American Farmland Owner newsletter. It's free, comes out every week, and it's the place where landowners get their news. You can find it now at AmericanFarmlandOwner.com. Thanks for joining us here on the podcast, and thanks for caring about the future of our farmland.